Okay. All right, we're live. My microphone, is it working? Testing. Testing.
Is the back turned on?
Where is it? No, that doesn't have a
No,
button.
say no. This doesn't have a button.
Do you want me to use the other one, Josh?
No, it's probably not turned on, Parker.
What? Oh, all right. All right, we're ready to go in a second. Oh yeah, yay. So Josh, can you put up number 1, the prophecy update outline for tonight's schedule? Number 1. Okay. Hello everybody. Facebook crowd out there, and Perry Facebook crowd, and my Facebook crowd, and welcome everybody to number 3 prophecy update. We're June 1st. 90-something degrees in Michigan, right? 91, did it get up to? 91. I love hot weather. My daughter doesn't like hot weather, but she does not. So, all right, there's a prophecy update. So tonight we're going to talk about 5 keys to understanding the end times that we talked about last week. We're going to go through end times prophecy news from Israel. We got some good stuff on that from the world and from the USA. And I just got something that I didn't even print out on the USA today. So that's how prophecy happens. It's just happening so fast. It's right before our eyes, all this stuff. So we're going to review last week's topics briefly. This week's topics we'll go over. We'll have a little offering, just a chance to give. And then the second part, we'll review last week's teaching on Revelation chapter 1 through 4 through 8. Then we're going to do the Revelation chapters 1 through 9, chapter 1, 9 through 20 to finish off chapter 1. And we'll have an invitation to receive Christ. And the next week's teaching is going to be Revelation chapter 2, where we start the churches. So that's kind of exciting when we start the churches. So, and that'll be next week. So anyways, 5 keys to understanding end times kind of review. I'm going to be adding another one, I think. I'll get to that in a little later. But approach to biblical prophecy is basically when the plain sense makes good sense. Seek no other sense lest you end up in nonsense. So basically, God really doesn't speak in riddles. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches, it says in Corinthians 14:33. So Jesus' first coming was literal, so will his second coming be literal. There's so much confusion out there with all this false teaching. And we've been talking about replacement theology, and we'll talk a little bit about that again, how it's been just from the church beginning. It's been there all the way through, and even now it's getting worse. But anyways, God's not the author of confusion. He came literally the first time. He's going to come back literally the second time. God gave us a book of Revelation not to scare us, but to prepare us, not to frighten us, but to invite us. And Revelation is the only book in the Bible that promises a blessing to those who read it and obey it. And, I just keep reading and preparing this week and a little bit of next week. Every time I go into Revelation, I get more out of it. It's just amazing, just God's Word. It's just all the stuff that's coming out. And it says in Revelation 1:3, blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near. And number 4, we feel things are out of control, which they seem like totally out of control, especially our country, around the world and our country. But according to God's will and purpose, things are falling into place as described prophetically in Scripture. God's in total control. And I got Angela's shirt that said, God's got this. He's got it. He's got it taken care of. He's in total control. It's like that. I gave the analogy of the parade. He knows from the beginning and the end. He knows everything that's going on from the foundations of the world. Even before they started, he knew all that's happening is falling into place. Just like a puzzle. We only see a part of a puzzle, but he has the whole puzzle. He knows everything. So we have nothing to worry about. Just we put our lives in his hands, and we're all set. Now we're going to go through man's tribulation, and it gets rough, but we're in Christ. So our eternity is so much to look forward to, and it's for eternity. So we're only on not even like I talked a couple weeks ago, not even a drop in a bucket. What 99.9999999 whatever goes on to infinity, or the time will be an eternity compared to what we live on this earth. So it is worth it to follow Jesus, totally worth it. The key verse in Revelation 1:19, we went over that, and I got the outline of that, outline of the book of Revelation. God gives us the outline in verse 19, the things which thou hast seen in chapter 1, which we're in. Next week, we're going to talk about the things which are the church age, the churches, which we're in now since Pentecost. And that's chapters 2 and 3, and the things that shall be hereafter, chapters 4 through 22. And if you'd kind of break that down, 4 to 22, chapters 4 and 5, the church is in heaven. We are not going through the tribulation. We're going to go through man's wrath. We're not going through God's wrath. Just remember that. So you can have that peace about you. It's called the blessed hope. It's not called the blessed joke. It's called the blessed hope. So that's what it is. And that's our hope. So we don't have to worry about that. But there's going to be a tribulation on earth. And I like the statement that somebody said. Jesus didn't, I think it was Dr. Heinsohn from the one book I have. He said, Jesus didn't just save us from hell, but Jesus also saves us from hell on earth during the tribulation. So we're saved from that. First half of the tribulation, chapters 6 to 9. The middle, 10 to 14. The last half of the tribulation, 15 to 19. And then the second coming of Christ later on in chapter 19. The millennial kingdom and great white throne judgment. Then the new heavens and the new earth. So it's all exciting. So let's talk about end times prophecy, Israel, the world, on the USA. I've got a story here, and this is pretty fresh off the presses. We're going to talk about Israel first. Israel is preparing for a preemptive strike on Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is a terrorist group in the Middle East. They're proxies of Iran, meaning they answer to Iran. So Iran is directing everything they do. They feed them with weapons. They feed them with everything. And they're using Hezbollah to attack Israel, just like terrorists and guerrillas. They attack Israel all the time. But it seems, according to this news story, it seems Israel's done with being reactive against Iran's proxies militias. Iran's desire is to strike Israel to distract them from their attacks on Tehran's nuclear program, and that's something I might talk about next week. There is a prophecy talking about a nuclear strike, in other words, by Israel in Iran, not nuclear war, but they're going to attack their nuclear power plants and stuff, and it's going to cause a reaction and a lot of devastation in Iran, and that is prophesied, so we'll talk about that. But but they're using this group, terrorist group Hezbollah. Recently, Israeli intelligence has uncovered very strong evidence that Hezbollah is planning an attack in northern Israel in which villages will be invaded and hostages taken. So they're planning this, Iran through their proxies. The Netanyahu administration will not sit by and wait for that attack to take place. They will be proactive this time. So instead of being reactive, they're going to go after Hezbollah. That is very likely that a major strike is about to take place by the Israel Defense Forces, or called IDF, against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Once that happens, Israel must be prepared to endure a period during which thousands of rockets will be fired across the border from Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza. Do you know that there's over 200,000 rockets pointed at Israel right now from all this area, Lebanon and Gaza Strip and all that? That's how many, there's all these rockets are, they have the Iron Dome, I don't know if you heard about that protects them, but still, there's going to be some damage to Israel, but they've got to be ready. But this story is the second handout I'm going to have you pull out in a second, but this could lead to what prophecy expert Bill Saulus calls the first end-time war talked about in his Psalm 83 book, and I have that book over there on the table. But it's a Psalm 83 book. Now, prophecy experts are kind of divided on this, but they're kind of split on the Psalm 83 war. There is an Ezekiel 38 war. We're going to be getting into that as well, more in depth, both of these wars, that everybody, almost all prophecy experts, know there's going to be a Ezekiel 38 war. But I've given you some handouts that I posted also on Facebook, and you can see them on Facebook if you're there. To kind of explain a little bit about the Psalm 83 war and the Ezekiel 38 war. in kind of the timetable when they come about to take place. The other aspect of the Psalm 83 war is when it will actually take place, and again, prophecy experts are kind of split on its timing, the ones that do believe in the Psalm 83 war. Most of those who favor the Psalm 83 war believe it will take place in the gap period, and I don't know if I think I talked about the gap period a little bit. So there's a period in chapters 4 and 5 when the church is in heaven, right? So chapter 3, 2 and 3 is the church age, which we're living in now, the time of grace, right? Chapter 4, verse 1, we're raptured up into heaven. So we're in the church is in heaven. So during chapters 4 and 5, the Antichrist doesn't come on the scene until chapter 6 and verse 1. So what happens during that time period, and a lot of people think there's going to, and I do as well, feel there's going to be a little gap period because the Antichrist, the 7-year timetable of the tribulation, the clock does not start ticking until the actual peace treaty between Israel and the Antichrist will be signed. Then they will be able to build their temple, which they are preparing for now. They have red heifers. Does everybody know that from Texas? They've got red heifers. They got all this stuff planned. And this is going to be the temple. This is going to be, unfortunately, the Antichrist's temple. So, but he'll turn his back on Israel halfway through. But anyways, they got everything prepared. So, but there's a problem because you got Islam or a lot of Muslims in that area. They're not going to let Israel build that temple, are they? Right? There's no way. There'd be a world war if that happened right now, right? So that's why I got some of these handouts. I'm going to explain God's timing and what the Bible really says. And again, it's a lot of, it's kind of split, but I really tend to what's just with this story right here. I really do think the Psalm 83 war is going to be before the Ezekiel 38 war, and that's what I got these handouts for you. It's kind of exciting to see God's word coming to pass. Because a lot of, just you got to remember in the early 1900s, late 1800s, there was Mark Twain that went to visit Israel, and he looked at the land. It was like a desert. It was nothing. He just made a comment, "Oh, it's awful. How could anybody live this?" And look at it now. How Israel came and is restored is just amazing, but anyways, so let's go to the handouts. Number 2, if you could put that on there, it's Islam's end. If everybody can look at their maps, as you can see, Islam's end. See right there, you see a map of the Muslim nations. That is Muslim nations currently today. That's all that in red is the Muslim nations today. You see how Israel is totally surrounded, right? That's exactly today, okay? So, and I do believe there's a Psalm 83 war. So and the second one, if you could put, you got that up in the first one, Josh? All right, no problem. Take your time. So anyways, that's the Muslim nations today. You see Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kakistan, the Stans, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all those in red are Muslim nations. And then you see the little thing of Israel. Isn't that amazing? Just that little green thing is Israel. See, it's hard to see. Look at that. Israel is the little green thing, and all those are Muslim nations surrounding it. God, and how have they survived all this? Because it's a miracle, because of God. It's no other way because of God. So just look at that contrast, though. It's just amazing. Okay, I got that up. So anyways, if you see that online, that little green speck is Israel and all the Muslim nations. Okay, let's go to number 2. And so war number 1 is the Psalm 83 war, and I believe this war, now a lot of people are split on this, and I'm not totally 100% believe it'll be in the gap period. It could happen before we're raptured, the Psalm 83 war. This is what they call, this is what happens after the Psalm 83 war. Remember, look at that area like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria. See a lot of the white that used to be red, a little bit of that white that's gone because that's what happens. The IDF, or the Israeli Defense, because they're strong now. I think, the 4th strongest army in the world now, Israel. Do you know that? They're going to defeat them, that inner group. And if we go to number 3, I'm going so fast on you. Oh yeah, go to number 2, Josh, on the board. But yeah, everybody has their handouts. So war number 1 is the Psalm 83 war. I'm kind of split on. I really believe it's going to happen. So if those ones listed there, it's Jordan, Egypt, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. Remember I read the story about Hezbollah? Hezbollah is in Lebanon. So that's one of the ones mentioned in the Psalm 83 war, okay? So we'll get that up on the screen. That's okay because they got the handout. So we're going to go to the next one. It's called the inner circle. See, this is the Psalm 83. This is the inner circle. What they mean by the inner circle, these are nations that are touching Israel, that are in the inner circle near Israel, the closest to Israel, right? So they got some really weird names here. Gabal, Tyre, Philistia, Amalek, Hagarenes, the Assyria, Ammon, Moab, Edom, and Ishmaelites. Those was back when Psalm 83 was written. That's what it mentions. So I'm going to give you, if you want to take a pen and write next to the number 2 one where it lists Jordan, Egypt, if you want to, I'm going to tell you which ones are which. Today's, what those names mean today. So if the first one is, if you see, if you look at under Jordan, today it was called the tents of Edom. Today it's the Palestinians and the southern Jordanians. Now that you heard about the Palestinians, right? So that's who they are today. But back then they were called. Let me see. Back then they were called Edom. But now Edom is called the Palestinians today. And isn't it funny? They were from the tents of Edom. Do you know that a lot of the Palestinians still live in tents in the desert? Do you know that? Isn't that interesting? So, and now the Ishmaelites, back on that, the third handout. Today, the Ishmaelites are the Saudis. Ishmael was the father. Remember Ishmael was Abraham's actually first son before Isaac. But he was the father of the Arabs. So that's where the Saudis are, Saudi Arabia. Then you have Moab is today the Palestinians and central Jordanians, not the southern ones, but the central. And then you got the Hagarenes. If I'm going too fast, let me know. Hagarenes are actually Egyptians today. Hagar was the Egyptian matriarch. Remember, Hagar was Ishmael's mother. Remember. So, and then Gebal, and that handout is the Hezbollah and the northern Lebanese, and Ammon is the Palestinians and northern Jordanians, and Amalek is the Arabs of the Sinai area. Philistia is Hamas. That's Hamas of the Gaza Strip. That's another terrorist group, Hamas. Tyre is Hezbollah and southern Lebanese. And see, Hezbollah's got, and Hamas has got units all over the place around there. Assyria is Assyrians and northern Iraqis. Isn't that interesting? So that's what's considered the inner circle of the Psalm 83 war that's going to take place. And right now, Hezbollah is being ordered by Iran to do a strike and do this, but Israel's going to do a preemptive strike, it looks like. So, I mean, that could lead right to the Psalm 83 war like tomorrow. I mean, things are just wow. Okay, now the next one is war number 2, the Ezekiel 38-39 war. So this is the war. The first war was a Psalm 83 war. That's the IDF. Israel is going to be so proud of themselves because they defeated these groups, right? Because of the power of the number 4 army in the world, right? But the Psalm 83 war, the Ezekiel 38 war, 39, those are the people that are involved in it. Russia, Iran, Turkey, Sudan, Libya, and all the stands, the Kakistans, the Afghanistans, the Uzbekistans, the Kyrgyzstans, all of them will be involved in that war. They're going to come down and try to loot Israel. Those are the outer circle that they talk about. And that's the next one, and it kind of explains Gomer, Tamarga, Tubal, Meshech, Magog. Magog is God. Gog is the leader of Magog, which is Russia today. So you can see all this is, and Persia was the name of Iran before they changed the name in, I think, 1939 or something. They changed the name from Persia to Iran. So isn't that interesting? But that's, okay, so once the war number 2 happens, remember all that red before? A little bit of the red was gone with Psalm 83. Look at how much more of the red is gone in war number 2 with Ezekiel. Wow, look at that. Okay? So that's the Muslim nations. Look at how much are taken away in the second war. Isn't that interesting? So, and the thing about the second war is God intervenes. He's the one that does battle. Remember, if you remember the biblical story, how he confused the Syrians and all that, and confused them, and they fought each other. That's what's going to happen with Russia and Iran. They're going to fight each other because God will send down earthquakes and different things like that, and stuff like that to strike them, and they'll get so confused they'll kill each other. And it's going to take, and they say it's going to take Israel 7 years to burn or convert all those weapons into energy that they'll be from that war. So God's going to do a miraculous thing. Then they'll know that he is God, because Israel couldn't have done it. But God steps in and fights for them just like he did in the past, right? Isn't it interesting? So that's the outer ring. Okay, now we come to Revelation 6, the second seal is war, right? The first seal is the Antichrist. He comes with, interesting, we'll talk about this a lot more in detail, but he comes with a bow, not an arrow. He comes in a false peace. He signs the peace treaty. Once that peace treaty is signed with Israel, there's going to be a fake peace for 3.5 years. So he's going to do that, but then there's going to be a war right after that, where the Antichrist is going to fight a war with a lot of the world, but he'll be on Israel's side, kind of. And but the Antichrist in the Revelation 6 war will destroy the rest of the Muslims, and that's when they sign the peace treaty. That's when Israel would be able to build their temple, because there's going to be no opposition now, because the Muslims would be kind of almost totally wiped out. There'll be a smidgen of them, but through these 3 wars, that's. Most Bible experts, and I kind of side that way. The way things are going now, I kind of side, God is miraculous. Are you seeing the size of Israel compared to all? But anyways, so there's 1.5 billion that are going to be dead in this Revelation 6 war. 1.5 billion people will be dead this is the tribulation. We're not going to be here. So, but he's going to destroy, and he's going to sign the peace treaty, and he's going to pretend unfortunately, 2/3 of Israel will accept him as the Messiah. They'll build their temple, and he'll let them do the sacrifices for 3.5 years. Then he's going to turn on them, put his image in the temple, and then that's when the 1/3 will flee, and God will protect them miraculously from the Antichrist, and Satan, who's going to try to kill him. Because Satan does not want God's prophecies to come true. That's why he used Hitler. Like I mentioned before, Satan has his man in place. He doesn't know when the rapture is going to happen, but he's got his man in place, and I believe right now. But he had Hitler in place thinking he might be the Antichrist. But he destroyed, 6 million Jews. But he did not completely destroy them. So Antichrist is going to try to completely destroy all the Jews, so Jesus won't come back, so he won't be fulfilled the second coming, right? So what's going to happen? So Antichrist is going to have this war. 1.5 billion are dead. It's going to be a false peace. He'll sign a peace treaty with Israel. So there's going to be 3 major, religions left on the earth at that time. There's going to be what's called the Harlot Church, the Great Harlot, and I believe it'll be kind of like the Catholic, I hate to say this, but I was raised Catholic, but kind of the Catholic Church intermingled with the Universalist Church. I mean, it's going to be a bunch of churches formed together. There's going to be the other religion will be the Tribulation Saints. They're not called Christians, they're called Tribulation Saints in the tribulation. And then there's going to be the Jews. So that's going to be the 3 major religions at the time. And if you look back in history in the Middle Ages, this is going to be interesting, because the Antichrist doesn't martyr. He starts martyring the Jews and Christians after he puts his image in the temple, and he makes everybody get the mark of 666, right? You can't buy or sell. That doesn't happen in the second half of the tribulation. But so what happens? The Jews aren't martyred in the first half. Antichrist goes after them when he puts his image in the temple in the second half. So what happens? Why are all these Christians or the tribulation saints martyred in the first half? Who does the martyring? I believe it's a Harlot Church, because it was, unfortunately, the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages that were martyring Jews and Christians. I think I mentioned William Tyndale made one of the first Bibles into English when they had the printing press, and he was martyred because the Catholic hierarchy did not want that anybody else reading the Bible, but only the priests or the higher up could read the Bible. So they martyred him. They martyred a lot of Christians. I think they're going to be doing the martyring again in the tribulation in the first half. And then the Antichrist will squash. He's going to use the harlot church for a while. Then he's going to squash them, and he's going to take over the worship for himself when he puts his image in the temple. Then he's going to martyr the Christians and the Jews. So anyways, this kind of gives you an outline of what's going to go on. But he'll destroy the harlot church right at the second half, so people worship him now. So, yeah, like I said, he kills 2/3 of the Jews and goes after the other third, but God protects them. There's a place called Petra. My professor in college, my professor in seminary, he had lived over in Jerusalem for a while, and he'd been to Petra. He used to do tours, and it's a place where only two people side by side can walk through the opening, and it's in it like a big cave, and it's wide open. I mean, a cave kind of, but it's open. So, but it's so much protection. So you can't get an army in there to attack anybody really. But God's going to protect them with water and floods and different things. But it's really interesting. So, anyways, that's what goes on. So I think that story is really interesting. That Hezbollah, Iran does not want to. I heard one prophecy expert talk. Iran does not want to fight Israel itself. It's too scared, but they're going to use their proxies. That's what they're doing right now. But then there's going to come a time when those proxies are eliminated, and then they're going to join up with Russia because Russia's coming.